Welcome to the YaraVita PROCOTE webinar for Yara North America, where today we're going to discuss some ideas and concepts on how to optimize your micronutrient application. I'm Trey Cutts. I'm the Market Development Director here in Yara North America, and I'm joined by our team of YaraVita product specialists around the eastern part of the U.S. today. So we'll introduce the team in just a moment and get into some exciting concepts on how to optimize and be efficient with your micronutrients this year. Just a few housekeeping items for the webinar platform. You'll see some buttons on your screen to where you can show and hide video, ask questions. We encourage you to put questions in the box throughout the webinar. We'll be monitoring those, and we can help field those during or definitely at the end. You can access handouts. You can see who the speakers are. If you need help with the webinar, or you can react. You can tell us how great a job or how much we're stinking it up. But please interact and involve. We'd love to hear from you, and we're really glad you're here today. A few more items. If you need to maximize the screen, please note on the video where you can maximize. We'll be doing a live demo a little bit later, so you may want to drag and blow up that screen. And as well, you can see where your buttons are and see where the slides are to view the webinar today. We'd like to introduce our team of YaraVita product specialists around the eastern region of the United States. This is kind of a subset of our team. You'll see how our commercial regions are broken out between the Southeast states, the Mid-Atlantic, the Eastern Corn Belt, Western Corn Belt, and the South. We have our regional sales managers. And then today on the call, we have our YaraVita product specialists, Katie Maxwell in the Southeast, Brad Gibbs in the Eastern Corn Belt, Jamie Schushinger in the Western Corn Belt, and also you can see other contacts in your regions. Please just reach out and we'll get you in contact with the right folks. Just an overview of the concepts we're going to cover today. We want to talk about how you homogenize an NPK blend with micronutrients versus creating a blend with dry granules. Really discuss how doing this homogenization creates a better micronutrient distribution, but really importantly, how that increases farmer profitability. It's more readily available for plant uptake. You get that micronutrient closer to the root, and you're really putting down what the plant needs and where it needs it, instead of guessing or doing an excessive application to try to compensate for that lack of spatial distribution. And lastly, what I'll talk about in my section today is the app we have to make our rates really simple to calculate and implement. So when we talk about higher micronutrient efficiency, what do we mean? And we're really getting at that homogenized concept. When you're able to put your micronutrients on every single granule of that NPK blend going out in the field, you're really maximizing the distribution and the placement of that micronutrient. When you put out, let's say a dry granule, into an already blended NPK application, the amount of those micronutrients is so low that it really lends to poor distribution and really getting lost in that blend. Versus when you can put it on every granule, you're getting about a 15x increase in coverage. So instead of having 24 granules of that micronutrient per square yard, you get about 358, and we'll look at some visuals on how that, what that means practically for you. But what about rates? Historically, we've applied micronutrients at a rate that's been calibrated to give a yield response. The drawback with that is the source used to calibrate that yield response. Because of that lack of distribution, invariably you have to apply micronutrients at rates higher than what the plant needs, really to overcome that lack of distribution. But when you think about micronutrients, we call them micronutrients not because they're less important, but simply because the plant uses less of them in their physiological processes. Here are some common crops in the eastern U.S., and really we're talking grams per acre versus pounds per acre, which is kind of counterintuitive because we always apply even micronutrients in several pounds per acre. But we're way over applying based on what a crop needs in a given year and really target yield goals. Especially when we look at the difference between removal and uptake. Uptake in a given year is really what we want to target in our applications to make sure that we're hitting those yield goals. If we're only focused on what a plant is removing, then we're really kind of guessing really what's either left in the soil for the next year, when really micronutrients is something we should be really targeting what that plant is going to extract every year. So how do we achieve this? And how do we ensure that the micronutrients we're putting down are actually getting into the plant? There's a concept of when we're applying, especially nitrogen-based fertilizer blends, when those fertilizers begin to hydrolyze and get into soil solution, it creates a microsite of low pH of acidification around that fertilizer granule. That's usually good because that lower pH works to free up micronutrients if they're present around that granule. The problem with doing a traditional blend is most often than not, those few granules that are placed in a given space are separated from that acidic microsite, not giving the ability for that micronutrient to get into soil solution and become plant available. Whereas if you impregnate those micronutrients directly on the fertilizer granule and create that homogenized product, you then get those micronutrients right in that microsite zone of acidification in order for them to become solubilized and in soil solution and hence available for the plant. So combined with the increased distribution getting to each plant, you're also increasing the likelihood that these micronutrients are in soil solution, going to be available for uptake when you make that application. And it's really easy to visualize. On the left-hand side or on the right-hand side, you see a traditional dry blend with urea and zinc granules. You can barely see them in this distribution. And you can imagine when they're being spread, being able to predict where those go is very difficult. And we'll have a stronger visual for that in a moment. On top of the unpredictability of where you're placing those granules, there's just very few of them. So the likelihood of all the plants in that acre or that square yard of accessing those zinc granules is actually pretty low. Whereas if you do the homogenized impregnation approach, urea coated with YaraVita PROCOTE zinc is on every single granule that's coming out the back of that spreader, meaning the high volume of distribution that you're putting out for your macronutrients, you're also carrying the micronutrients in the same way. This exponentially increases the amount of zinc going out into the field in terms of distribution. When you visualize this, say in a square yard, which you can think on your farm, how many plants are in a square yard. When you're applying urea, you want to ensure that there's enough nitrogen, enough of those particles making adequate coverage to get across your crop. But it's interesting, when we make a micronutrient investment with a granular product, we're not getting the same guarantee that that micronutrient is getting where it needs to go. You can see this visual of the amount of particles, and these are counted amount of particles that would be in a square yard of coverage. You can see this granular boron getting lost in the blend. And then to single out where those are, there's very few of them. And think about that in terms of, again, in a square yard, how many plants are trying to access those few granules. And this occurs, pretty uniformly, when you create various blends and really understand the volume of what you're putting out. It becomes pretty clear how inefficient a granular micronutrient application actually is for our investments. Compounding this inefficiency is the variation in particle size. So different particle sizes have different masses. Therefore, they're going to separate in a blend. They're going to spread at different widths. So not only the difference in size in a granular boron, this difference in size and weight, it's going to separate all over that blend. So you could end up with 70% of your boron being in one part of that blend load, meaning that only one part of your field actually got a boron application. And we've done some work to really measure this and visualize it. When we've done spreading tests where we've laid pans out, gone back out and counted, where is that zinc in the field, when it's coming out the back of the spreader. You can see in this chart on the left, this variation in distribution, meaning you're getting significant overdosing and underdosing of that zinc, which is detrimental in both circumstances, versus the chart below, where you get a nice even distribution. You're applying the rate that crop needs, and you're ensuring that rate is uniform across the field. Our fields have enough in-field variability that we try to manage year in and year out. Why complicate that more with an even more variable micronutrient application? So in short, increased feeding sites equals greater likelihood of that crop being able to uptake. We talked about applying more than what a crop needs to compensate for a yield response, but what we also showed that you can run the risk of even overdosing in areas of your field because of the lack of control you have when you're spreading that blend. You don't know where it's exactly ending up in the field, versus a homogenized approach that's meeting the appropriate rate for what that crop needs for its physiological processes in a given year. You can really ensure that the investment that you're spending is going to turn into productivity in that year, versus being lost in other inefficient ways. And the beauty is that we've built this into an easy to use app, either at the retail application level or at the grower level, to understand what rates are needed. We've built in all of our crop knowledge for crop uptake of micronutrients to determine what rate of our PROCOTE products are needed to do the correct agronomic rate for the right yield environment, so that you maximize your investment, maximize your productivity, maximize your return, and you're not being inefficient with your micronutrient spend, and you're not hurting your crop by either under or overdosing. So we encourage you to engage in the app, but we're also here to support you from the Yara side, and especially our team of YaraVita product specialists around the country. So with that, I'll turn it over to our first YaraVita specialist speaker of the day, Brad Gibbons from the Eastern Corn Belt. Brad?
It's very near and dear to a lot of us, and you know, Trey did a very good job of discussing the distribution piece of PROCOTE and why that's valuable. And I'm just going to spend a little bit of time talking about the additional benefits, features and benefits of PROCOTE and why we feel we have the most superior product on the market. So let's start off first with what is PROCOTE for those of you who have not seen it. PROCOTE it's very simply an oil-based micronutrient suspension that is used for impregnation on dry fertilizer. It cannot be solubilized. We cannot put it in a spray tank. Its one job is to coat dry fertilizer blends, and it does it very, very well. So down that line, you know, some of the key features of PROCOTE is it's easy. Once we get everything in place and get things set up right, it's an easy and efficient application of micronutrients. It eliminates bags and pallets of dry micronutrients in your dry buildings. Likewise, if you bring micronutrients in bulk, we can eliminate a need for a separate storage bin. Low use rates. So what that means is rather than having a truckload of dry zinc, for instance, in your shed, either in a bulk bin or on pallets, we have one tote there that you know, replaces that. As Trey said, obviously increased coverage in the field, which is very, very key. Value add for your retailers, for your locations, your organizations. With the state of agriculture being what it is right now, anytime we can get a value added product in there that allows for ROI, not only for you, but for your growers primarily, more importantly, you know, that's a big win for all of us. And one of the hidden factors that we don't talk a whole lot about, with it being an oil-based product, it will help minimize some dust in the blends you have going out. So PROCOTE it's a fully formulated product, which I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. But what that means, one of the keys, as I see it, is the raw ingredients we use are very unique to the industry, in my opinion. We use pharmaceutical grade raw materials, or I should say pharmaceutical grade is the lowest grade of material we use. So where that's key is any farm to table type of products that this is being applied to. You know, we don't have to worry about any risks of some undesirable nutrient contamination, such as cadmium or something like that could cause some issues in the fresh food markets. Oil-based carriers, I mentioned, no additional water is being added to the fertilizer. So when you're using nutrient stabilizers and things of that nature, we're not adding any more water. So that will help prevent some of the clumping and some of the standing up that we see in the trucks. Also, again, that the dust reduction that we see out of it, overall just creating an improved handling characteristic for your fertilizer blends. Highly concentrated formulations, they are really, really heavy concentrates, which gives them a very unique position in the marketplace because of how highly concentrated they are. We're getting back into, again, those lower use rates and some flexibility. You know, it's each one of these, the PROCOTE products can be tailored to each individual farming applications as needed, just by the different amounts that we use. You know, going back to Trey's conversation about the PROCOTE app there's a lot of flexibility with these products. Varying particle sizes, I think this is probably the most underspoken about key to PROCOTE and what it does, just in my opinion, but we'll discuss that here in a second. So what I mean when we talk about particle size, it's very, very much the same thing we talk about when Trey talked about coverage. You know, the more coverage you can get, the smaller the particle size by putting it on the dry fertilizers. The more coverage you get, the better likelihood the plant will actually intercept it. So inside of PROCOTE, there are varying particle sizes of the nutrient itself. So, you know, what we see here, these four pictures, the top beaker and tray have the same weight of material. as the bottom beaker and tray. So let's just, I like to talk about zinc because I'm in the corn belt and corn is king. So let's just talk about a zinc application. If we use those top two lines as like your zinc application, you were to throw that out in that 1 square yard where you might have 6 or 7 plants growing, the chances for the plant to intercept that are negligible. Where conversely, if you apply that bottom beaker to that same square yard, every one of those 6 or 7 plants that is growing in that square yard is going to have the ability to reach the micronutrient, of zinc, which is really key when we talk about zinc because it's not a highly mobile nutrient. So, being able to get it close to the plant and into the plant quickly is what's going to be key for that nutrient uptake. So when I talk about particle sizes inside the blend, that picture obviously was embellished considerably. We are talking about the particle sizes of YaraVita on the micron scale, and there are 1,000 microns in 1 millimeter. So these, the YaraVita product is so finely ground and so finely blended that these particles, if you were able to solubilize them, you could run them through a spray nozzle. So the particle sizes, even though I talked about them being different size, they are still micro in the grand scheme of things. But the advantage of having those different particle sizes is the smaller particle sizes. When we think about Trey talking about the acidic zone that's created around your nitrogen granule or your fertilizer granule, those small granules the small particles will break down really quick. That ensures a quick release of the nutrient. And again, we'll just talk about zinc because it's closest to my heart. So we're going to make sure that we have that zinc, that finely ground, really small zinc particle break down due to the acidic zone because we're placing it on the substrate. It's going to melt down quickly, get into the soil solution, into the plant very fast. Then we have let's just call it a medium size particle. That's going to wear down a little bit slower. So rather than having that quick, immediate release, we may see a release, 5, 7, 10 days later. And then likewise, the large granules, they're going to weather down slower, allowing for an extended release period. So, I get asked the question a lot about, well, how can we prove that? Or can you prove it? So at our research facility over in Pocklington, England, they took 3 of our different flowable products. We did a copper, a manganese, and a zinc. And they tested this theory just to see what kind of results they would have. So what they actually did was they took these 3 different nutrients, they sprayed them on blotting paper and put them in a humidity chamber where they could replicate the change of, the daily temperatures, the daily humidity levels. That way they could replicate dew formulation just as we would see anywhere in the area we're talking about. Over a 90-day period, they collected the dew and they analyzed it to see what kind of nutrient content they could find in it. What you see to the left here is what they analyzed, and the numbers may be a little bit hard to read, but if you go across the bottom axis there, it's 90 days over the entire trial. As they were doing this, they were able to show where there was still nutrient being collected in the dew. So what that means is there was still nutrients being dissolved at that 90-day period. There was still nutrient there to be dissolved. So that's really key when you start looking at again zinc, where we're in the area we're talking about. I pulled this for something else I was working on because I was just curious, because we spent a lot of time talking about boron, knowing that that's a highly mobile nutrient, and we know that there's deficiencies that can be found almost anywhere. But again, with zinc being near and dear to my heart, I pulled a map for these the zinc deficiencies that we would find in my region and in the Eastern Corn Belt, and as we see it, consists of Michigan, Indiana, Kentucky, and Illinois, and Wisconsin. So based on everybody that was invited to this call, I would imagine we all are in some sort of a zinc deficiency area. Whether it is upwards of 20% of the zinc deficiencies that were pulled, the zinc deficiencies that were found in soil tests, up to 66% down in Kentucky. This study was done. There were a minimum of 2,000 samples that were pulled, and we did not run this. I am not 100% sure whose data this is, but it's really telling when you think about the year that we're in with these increased commodity prices, or I'm sorry, the increased input prices. You know, I had a conversation with a gentleman Monday, and he told me that his cost of producing has gone up 3x what it was last year. We all know the commodity prices are up and things look good, but if we talk about corn in particular, they're not 3x what they were last year. So in a season where folks are looking to maybe reduce the money they're spending, understandably, that may not necessarily be the best thing to do, because if we had a break even of 150 bushels of corn last year with 3x the input prices this year, you know, that break even may move to 200 bushels. We can't raise 200 bushels by putting less nutrient out there. We have to fill in the gaps. And micronutrients, as Trey mentioned, they're called micro for a reason. Just the smallest gram, you know, he was talking about grams down to that level. If you have a zinc deficiency, or your growers have a zinc deficiency, it doesn't matter how much nitrogen they put out, it doesn't matter how much potassium they put out. The yield's going to be limited by that least limiting factor, which would be zinc. As we can see, zinc is a limiting factor almost everywhere in the region that is represented on this call today. So it's worth having the conversation with folks, and I understand it's difficult with commodity prices being what they are, but you know, this may be the one thing that growers being held back from going to that next level of 200 bushel of corn. So when we were talking about the feeding, the 90-day feeding, I just wanted to add this here real quick to kind of summarize or wrap everything up or tie it all together, I guess. You know, an application of PROCOTE at planting, if we look at that 90-day feeding that we get, this is the nutrient uptake in corn. And again, this is kind of difficult to read, but when you really start to see the nutrient uptake really ramp up with that spring application of PROCOTE Zinc or PROCOTE BMZ or PROCOTE BCMZ, we still know that we have enough nutrient that's going to be available when the crop really starts calling on the need, and that need really kicks in. So, you know, it's different than like an application of ammoniated zinc that goes out and it's either used right away or it's gone. You know, what we've been able to do with PROCOTE is provide something that will ensure that we can cure all those early season deficiencies that we see in the corn plant, and then still provide a slower release of nutrient going into the time of peak demand for those nutrients. I'm a big believer in a split application if and where it's possible, not necessarily doubling the rate of PROCOTE, but splitting in half and putting out two different timings. That way you can provide those nutrients all the way through the life cycle of that corn plant. So what we've got here, just a few pictures, because you know, seeing is believing, in my opinion. It goes back to everything that Trey was talking about and the things I were talking about you know, how we can get the coverage good and get the nutrient into the plant quicker. By doing that, you know, we're going to see those responses. And again, if we just talk about zinc, because as I've mentioned, that's kind of my favorite, root and shoot growth is what it's responsible for. So as you can see here, between the blend with no zinc and with zinc sulfate, there's not a lot of difference. I mean, you can obviously tell where the zinc granule landed because the three plants that are touching it are bigger. Whereas if you look at the blend of PROCOTE, those plants are a lot more uniform than you see in either of the left two pictures. Likewise, here's a great shot of the root development that we see. You know, again, with the PROCOTE zinc being applied on the left, and then the low zinc application, I'm assuming was a granule form as well, on the right. You know, it's all about how can we get it where the plant needs it, and how can we help break it down and get it into the soil solution faster. So some of the stuff I did early in my time with Yara, I wanted to see it on a big scale. I'm a farmer myself, and seeing is believing for me as well, and I had to prove it to myself. So I went out. These are actually my wheat fields that we did a little bit of work on, and as you can see early on, we put the BMZ on our starter fertilizer, and early season right there before we got a frost and got a snow, we could see a larger root mass and just an overall healthier plant. And then on the right, pre-harvest, a couple weeks before we planted, I just went out and dug up the same amount of plants, and you can see it consistently. We just had that bigger root and shoot mass and development where we could get the micronutrients consistently. Same thing, I wanted to see how product would work regardless of when we spread it, and just different ways of spreading it. So we did some fall broadcast PROCOTE zinc work, and some spring broadcast PROCOTE zinc work. As you can see, where we put it out in the fall, it was still there when the plant needed it come springtime. And conversely, when we put it out in the spring, it was released quick enough that the plant was able to utilize it early in its season. Again, root and shoot development. Just look at the root mass that you see on the PROCOTE treated plants. It's really amazing to see. And theoretically, you build a bigger factory in the root, you get a bigger output through the plant. Oops, sorry. Same thing, just some more photos. We actually did this here. This was done strip till in Illinois because I wanted to see what it would look like just through a different application method. We went broadcast before, so we went strip till. Again, you can see the picture on the left. The left side picture was BMZ fall applied. The right side was they had no micronutrient in it at all. I will say the one thing that's key about this, the picture there on the left, was about 2 weeks before we went out, they had a big windstorm. And you can see there the picture on the right that had no zinc in it. That half of the field was really goosenecked like that. And the cooperator that was doing this, we parked on the road, and he jumped up on his toolbox and looked. And he said that he could tell pretty easily, he felt like, where that PROCOTE application was made because the corn seemed to be standing better. Again, root and shoot development. Likewise, to the right, springtime strip till application. Again, same thing. It's all visual. It's all anecdotal. We didn't take any of this to yield, but I've got many, many more pictures like this that show the same thing that we're seeing. So it was enough that I started to really believe in the product really early on. Again, just a few more things here. On the left was spring applied zinc, PROCOTE zinc. I cut a couple stalks in half just to see what kind of visual difference there was. And again, where we had the PROCOTE applied, we could see a much bigger stalk, much healthier stalk. And in a lot of instances, they seem to be about a leaf stage ahead of the corn where we didn't make an application, or where we did a granule zinc application. Again, coverage, being able to get it where the plant needs it, where the plant can take it up, and getting it into the plant quicker. Likewise, there on the right, it was just another BMZ application, spring broadcast. Pretty marked difference there in root development. So just to bring everything home from a selling standpoint, why PROCOTE? Why do we feel like we have the best mousetrap on the market? Everything I talked about is key, but the real quick and dirty of it is we get that even micronutrient coating that Trey talked about. That's that uniform coverage, the increased feeding sites. The plant doesn't have to struggle to work for it. We can break it down, get in the plant quicker. We can eliminate that early season stress on that plant and try and keep it as healthy as we can till max predetermined yield is set. No segregation. So that means that every granule of fertilizer that goes out is going to have that micronutrient on it. We're not going to get the hot spots, or we're going to get the blanks where nothing is applied. Dust reduction for everybody on this call, that can be a huge thing, just because it's going to make the fertilizer handle better. It's not going to stand up in the corner of the boxes. You're just not going to have that plume of dust. And if you're spreading fertilizer on a windy day, And the way the world is right now, the wrong person sees that, they're probably going to have some complaints. It's a perceived cleaner product. And then it'll also help mitigate any kind of burns or speckling that happens on the leaf where that plume of dust comes out. High performance micros, as we mentioned, the efficiency through the application and how we break the nutrient down, get it in the plant, it's phenomenal. And then immediately available to the plants, as we talked about with those different particle sizes. We get that quick release, and then we get that long time feeding as well. And ultimately, what that means for everybody involved is increased return on investment. And anytime we can provide our growers a return on investment, that's a good thing for them and for us. So with that, I will turn it over to Katie, and I will say thank you again for your time.
All right, thank you, everyone. I hope you can hear me. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you, Brad and Trey. Really appreciate that intro to PROCOTE. So what I'm going to do now is, you see it behind me, we're going to do a live demo of how the coating process works. If you've seen us at any trade shows, you may have seen this setup before, but I've got my tabletop blender, and what I'm going to use today is urea. Just white urea, and then I'm going to use our PROCOTE zinc and just show you how we're going to coat that. I've got everything pre-measured for you, so it'll be a very timely demo, but I just want to run through a little bit what we're going to be doing. So we have ran the numbers over the years, and we're talking about coating with PROCOTE. Normally our ideal coating properties is anywhere between that 2 and 4 quart rate. So what I'm going to do, because we're at this small scale, we want to do that maximum coating so you can see it. So I'm going to go with the 4 quart or 1 gallon rate per ton. And in order to do that on the small scale, we've calculated it out that 1 pound of substrate, and in this case will be urea, is equivalent to 1 ton, and 1 cc of PROCOTE per pound of product is going to equal that 1 gallon rate. So again, I've got all that pre-measured for you. So I'm going to walk back so you guys can see it in action. And if you have trouble viewing the screen, Trey did mention earlier in the presentation, there is a way to make the demo larger, to make that screen larger if you follow those directions. If not, there are other opportunities for you to see these demos on our YouTube page, which I believe those links are also included in the beginning of the presentation. So here I've got my urea. I just use my regular tabletop blender here. Go ahead and put it in. We'll turn this up. And again, whenever you're adding this at the retail level, it's just important that PROCOTE is the last thing that goes on your blends, because we want that full coating on everything. So before it drops into the elevator or goes down into the spreader, we need 6 to 8, 10 is better, feet at least before it goes up, so we can get everything fully coated. So you can see here, I'm going to go ahead and stop it. So we started with our white urea, and now we have, bring it up to the camera so you can see. We have our blue, fully coated, homogeneous blend that now has micronutrients on every granular prill. So Jamie, there you go, she already has it on there for you. So PROCOTE, we've talked a lot about zinc. Brad mentioned PROCOTE B and Z, but we have a full range. We also have a manganese source, and we have a BCMZ and just a copper. So those are all available to you here in the US. So that's it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this webinar. So now we'll open it up for questions, and I'll send it to Jamie.
Yes, thank you, Katie. I think the live demonstration really just drives home a lot of the talking points that we discussed today. So always good to see it in person. Always are able to bring that demo live to you guys in person as well. So just always get in contact with your local rep for that. As we kind of wrap this up here, there are a few questions. I encourage anyone to put any extra questions in the question and answer box on the bottom part of your screen, and I will go through those and have the team answer them. So I'll just go ahead and give you a couple of seconds to put any questions in there that you might have. One question, I guess, that popped up here is ingredient sourcing and different things going on. Brad touched on that briefly if you want to go back to where we get our ingredients from and the quality of them.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was having trouble with my microphone, but as I mentioned, they are the ingredients in ProCote. They are pharmaceutical grade. Where they're sourced from, that's kind of proprietary information, as I understand it. But they're pharmaceutical grade or better. So, if you think about the zinc sulfate that you put on your nose to prevent sunburn, or the zinc sulfate that comes in diaper rash creams, those are the minimum quality of products of micronutrients that we're putting into ProCote.
Very good. Another question here. In a MAP, potash, Pell-Lime blend, would you add the YaraVita PROCOTE in last, or treat the first two products and finish with the Pell-Lime?
I would, so that's always a good question when we talk about Pell-Limes and Pell-Gyps and things like that. What I would encourage you to do to that regard before you do anything on a large scale, just get some ProCote, whichever formulation you want to use, get it from one of us, and we'll do a jar test just to make sure. But I have done it in the past. I've done some jar tests in some areas where Pell gypsum was being used. We treated it at a really, really high rate, and we set it on the shelf to see how it would look and make sure that it wouldn't start to melt down those pellets. It was fine, and I believe those samples may still be sitting on the retailer's shelf 3 years after the fact. The key to it is, and the thing to remember is, ProCote is not water, so those water soluble pellets like your Pell-Lime or your Pell-Gyp, they shouldn't break down because we're not introducing that water to them. But I would always say, let's take a look at it first and make 100% sure before we make that decision. But ideally, I'd like to have it on every granule that goes out, even the Pell-Lime, because, again, that's just more exchange sites for the plants to feed from. But certainly, before we do that, let's take a look at it. If it doesn't work, it does seem to melt down, or you have some integrity issues with those pellets, then treat your P and your K first, and then run your Pell-Lime in afterwards.
Very good. Any other questions? You can go ahead and put them in the box here below. Any other questions from the team internally that we could discuss? Otherwise, I think we are looking good on time and on questions.
Jamie, the only thing I would add is, if anyone that's on this webinar today would be interested in a live demo similar to what we did today, all of the YaraVita product specialists are equipped, and even our sales agronomists are equipped to do this kind of tailgate style. So if you have a grower that is interested, that you think would help them get over the hump and be more interested in ProCote, please let us know, and we can do this at the grower level or at the retail level at any capacity that we're able to.
Very good. Yes, we love doing the live demonstrations. I think it's good for everyone here. All right, that looks like all the questions. I'm going to go ahead and throw our contact information back up here too, if I am able. Oh, actually, we have one more question that just came in, since we do have time. and it is on cost. So we're going to go ahead and save that question for your local representative. It's all similar across the region, but that will be more of a regional-based question if that's okay. And to file into that, any question that we did not get to, or if you have extra questions, a local representative is going to go ahead and reach out to you and help answer those. Feel free to reach out to any of us as well, too. We are happy to help, as well as get you to the right person if we are not it. Otherwise, we're happy to see everyone's attendance and participation through all of this, and we'll look forward to seeing you again and continuing this conversation. So thank you, and have a great rest of your day.